Mom, can he live with us? Black girl asked, holding her mom's hand, unaware he was a billionaire. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin the story. It was a cold evening in the city, with snow lightly falling from the sky and the streets bustling with holiday shoppers, their breath visible in the air. At the corner of a busy street, there stood a large, imposing mansion behind a tall iron fence. The lights inside flickered through the frosty windows, casting a warm glow on the cold, barren pavement. A little girl, barely 7 years old, stood in front of the gate, holding her mother's hand tightly. Her worn shoes barely made a sound as they shuffled through the snow-covered sidewalk. Her clothes were old, patched, and stained from days of hard work and struggle. But her spirit, though small, was strong and bright. She looked up at her mother, her brown eyes wide with hope. "Mom, can he live with us?" she asked quietly, her voice a soft whisper that seemed to be swallowed by the night. Her mother stopped walking, a look of surprise flashing across her face, but before she could answer, the little girl continued, still holding her hand. "He looks like he needs help, and I think he's lonely." The man standing by the large front gate of the mansion had been watching the two for a while now. Dressed in an expensive suit, his hands were tucked in his pockets, and he stood tall, his gaze lingering on the little girl. He hadn't expected to hear such a question, let alone from a girl so young, standing in the snow with no shelter. She seemed out of place, her innocence stark against the backdrop of luxury. He wondered what had led her to this moment, standing in front of a life she could never have imagined. The little girl, unaware of who he was, didn't even look up at him. She was too focused on her mother's face, waiting for an answer. The man couldn't help but feel a pang in his chest, a strange pull that made him step forward. But he hesitated, unsure of what to do. The girl's words had caught him off guard. "Can he live with us?" Her question was simple, yet profound. It struck a chord deep inside of him, stirring something he hadn't felt in a long time. His mind raced with thoughts of his own childhood, the loneliness, the wealth he had grown up with, but never the warmth of a family. His eyes followed the little girl as she tugged her mother's sleeve, urging her to look at him. But the moment passed. He could have walked away, but something in that small gesture, that small request, made him stop in his tracks. What was he supposed to do now? "I apologize for the confusion. Here's the second part of your request." The man stood there for a moment, frozen in his thoughts. The little girl and her mother had already started walking away, their footsteps crunching in the snow. The question lingered in his mind. Can he live with us? It was so simple, yet it felt like a challenge. The question had caught him off guard, but he couldn't shake it. He felt a strange sense of guilt, as if the universe had thrown a curveball his way and he had no choice but to face it. The girl was no more than 7 years old, yet she saw something in him, a loneliness, perhaps, that he had buried deep inside for years. He wasn't sure what to make of it, but the thought gnawed at him. He watched as the little girl tugged her mother's sleeve, speaking softly in her ear. The mother, weary and worn, glanced back at him. Her face seemed unsure, hesitant. They walked away without saying another word. He found himself following them without realizing it, his feet crunching the snow beneath him. What was it that made him want to know more about them? What was it that had drawn him to this moment? He caught up to them just as they reached the end of the block. The mother turned to him, her tired eyes locking onto his for a brief moment. She didn't say anything, but there was something in her gaze, something that told him she didn't expect much from him. "Do you need help?" he asked, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. The mother blinked, surprised by the question. She was about to say something, but then paused, as if weighing her words carefully. The little girl, still holding her mother's hand, glanced up at him, her face innocent and unguarded. "Can he live with us?" she asked again, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Her voice was soft, but there was a quiet strength in it that caught him off guard. The man felt a knot form in his stomach. He wasn't used to this kind of directness, this kind of unfiltered honesty. "We're not in a position to offer help," the mother said, her voice low, tinged with regret. "But thank you." The little girl looked up at her mother, her expression one of confusion. "But why?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Why can't he stay with us?" The man was taken aback by the question. Why couldn't he stay with them? He had his own house, his own life, filled with luxury and security. He had everything a person could want, and yet he felt empty. The little girl's question seemed to cut through the walls he had built around himself. "I don't know," the mother said, her voice filled with a sadness he couldn't quite place. "Maybe it's just not that simple." The man stood there, watching them for a moment, before he found himself speaking again. "You don't have to worry about anything," he said, his voice quieter now. "I'm not asking to stay, but I'd like to help." The mother looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. She seemed to be weighing his words, trying to decide if he was being genuine. The little girl, however, simply smiled up at him. "Okay," she said, her voice full of hope. "But can he live with us someday?" The question was simple, but it hung in the air, waiting for an answer. The man was quiet for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. He had never considered this kind of connection before. He had never thought about offering help in this way. And yet, something in the girl's innocent gaze made him feel like he had to do something. "I can't promise that," he said, his voice soft, but firm. "But I'll do what I can." The little girl nodded, satisfied with his answer. "Thank you," she said, her small hand still clutching her mother's. The man watched them turn and walk away, their figures disappearing into the distance. He stood there for a moment, thinking about the question she had asked. He had everything, but he had never felt so alone. He wasn't sure what had happened in that brief moment, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't just walk away. He had to do something. The world was full of people like her. People who had nothing, but still had so much to give. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for him to stop hiding behind his wealth and start giving back. The thought lingered in his mind as he walked back to his mansion, his heart a little lighter, but his mind racing with questions. What could he do to change his life? And could it start with a small girl, asking if he could live with them? I watched them walk away, and for the first time in a long time, I found myself following. It wasn't the kind of thing I usually did, but something about her question lingered. "Can he live with us?" she had asked, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I had everything: wealth, power, a mansion, and yet, somehow, this little girl, with nothing but the love she had for her mother and a hope that burned bright in her eyes, made me question everything. I knew she hadn't understood the magnitude of the question she had asked. She had no idea who I was, or what I had, or how different our lives were. And yet, the simplicity of her words was a stark contrast to the complexity of my world. I found myself standing at the end of the street, watching them as they disappeared into the shadows of the night. I had no idea why, but I felt an overwhelming urge to act, to do something. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about the little girl and her mother. I knew I had to find them again. I didn't know why, but I felt a strange pull toward them, like the universe had aligned for this very moment. I spent the entire morning driving around, my mind racing, until I finally found their apartment building. It wasn't much, just an old, rundown complex tucked away in the corner of the city. But I knew this was where they lived. I parked the car and hesitated for a moment. I wasn't sure what to do next. I didn't know what I was hoping to accomplish. But the girl's words echoed in my head. "Can he live with us?" I had to see them again. I walked up to the building, the cold air biting at my face, and rang the buzzer. There was no answer. I rang again, a little louder this time. Still nothing. I was about to leave when I heard a soft voice from the intercom. Yes, it was the mother. I took a deep breath. "Hi, it's me, the man from yesterday. I wanted to check on you both, make sure everything was okay." There was a long pause on the other end before she responded. "We're fine, thank you," she said, her voice polite but distant. "We don't need anything." I could hear the hesitation in her words, the subtle but clear rejection. She didn't trust me, and I didn't blame her. We were strangers. But I couldn't walk away. "Please, let me help," I said, my voice sincere. "I don't want anything in return. I just want to make sure you're both safe." There was another pause, and then the door clicked open. I stepped inside and walked up the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the door to their apartment, I hesitated once more. This wasn't something I had ever done before. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find, or what I was expecting. I knocked lightly. The door opened, and there she was, the little girl, standing in front of me with her mother behind her. She looked up at me with those wide, innocent eyes, as if nothing in the world could ever hurt her. Her mother stepped aside, letting me in. "You shouldn't have come," she said, her voice low, but there was no anger in it. She seemed resigned, almost sad. "I know," I replied, stepping inside. "But I couldn't just leave. I have to do something. Something more than just nothing." The apartment was small, cramped, and smelled faintly of old wood and something unidentifiable. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. The little girl sat down on the couch, her eyes fixed on me as if trying to understand why I was there. "I don't have much to offer," the mother said, her voice softer now. "But we can share what we have." I nodded, not knowing what to say. "It's not about what you have," I said, my voice quiet. "It's about what we can do for each other." The words felt heavy, as if they carried more weight than I had intended. I wasn't sure what I was even offering them, but I knew I couldn't walk away. The little girl looked up at me, her face serious. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice hesitant but strong. I nodded, curious. "Will you stay with us?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. The question was simple, but it hit me hard. I had never considered this before, living with them, being a part of their world. But in that moment, I realized that what I had spent my entire life building, didn't matter. What mattered was connection. What mattered was the love between these two people, and the hope that the little girl had given me. I looked at her mother, and she looked back at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but also something more. Trust, perhaps. "I don't know what that means," I said, my voice low, but I couldn't look away from the girl. "But I'll try." The little girl smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something stir inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. A sense of belonging. Maybe, just maybe, I had found a place where I could finally be myself, a place where I could give something back. I sat down on the couch next to her, my heart still racing. This was just the beginning, and I had no idea where it would lead, but in that moment, I knew I was doing the right thing. I arrived the next day, a decision I had made almost on impulse. It was early in the morning, the sunlight barely creeping through the blinds as I stood outside their apartment door. I had spent the entire night thinking about it, the question the little girl had asked me. "Can he live with us?" I didn't know how to answer her, but there was something inside me that knew this wasn't just a fleeting thought. Something had shifted inside me the moment I entered their world, and it wasn't about charity. It was about connection. The truth was, I had spent so many years wrapped up in my own world, in a bubble of luxury and isolation, that I had forgotten what it meant to really see someone, to really be seen. But the little girl, with her simple question, reminded me of something fundamental I had lost. I knocked softly on the door, and it creaked open a moment later. The mother stood in front of me, her eyes guarded but not cold. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me as if trying to understand why I was standing there. Her daughter, the girl who had asked the question that had haunted me, peeked around the corner, her small face lighting up with recognition. "You came back," she said, her voice tentative but hopeful. I smiled at her, feeling something warm rise in my chest. "I did," I replied, my voice quieter than I intended. She didn't say anything else, just stepped aside to let me in. The apartment was the same as the day before, small, worn, but filled with life. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. I stepped in, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The mother didn't say much, but I could feel the tension in the air. She was hesitant, and rightfully so. I was a stranger, someone from an entirely different world, offering help she wasn't sure she needed. "I know this is unexpected," I said, trying to find the right words. "But I want to help. I don't know how yet, but I think I want to be a part of this." The mother looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the faintest flicker of something in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or curiosity. "Why?" she asked, her voice soft. "Why do you want to help?" I paused, the weight of her question sinking in. I didn't have an easy answer. "Because I've been living a life that feels empty," I said, my voice quieter now. "I've spent so much time focusing on building things that I've forgotten what it means to really care about people. You and your daughter. You've reminded me of that." The mother looked down at the floor, her hands wringing together in a nervous gesture. She was clearly trying to process what I was saying, but I could tell she didn't know what to make of it. "We don't need charity," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've managed. We always manage." I nodded. I'm not here to give you charity, I said, my voice firming. I'm here because I think we could help each other. I'm not offering you money or some kind of handout. I just want to help you build a future where you don't have to manage anymore, where you can have stability and safety, and most importantly, a choice. The little girl tugged at my sleeve, looking up at me with those bright eyes that had first asked me that question, the one that still echoed in my mind. Can I show you something? She asked. I nodded, and she led me to the corner of the room where a small drawing sat on the table. It was a picture of a house, a simple, warm-looking house with a yard and a big tree in front. This is where I want us to live, she said, her voice serious but full of hope, where we don't have to worry anymore. I looked at the drawing, the simple sketch of a dream, and something inside me shifted. I had been living in a mansion for years, surrounded by everything money could buy, but I had never felt a true sense of home. The kind of home this little girl dreamed of. I think we can make that happen, I said, my voice steady now, more certain than I had been in a long time. The mother looked up at me, her face still uncertain but less guarded. She didn't respond right away, but I could see her processing what I had said. You don't have to make promises you can't keep, she said, her voice low. We don't need much, but we do need trust. And I can't just hand that over. I nodded again, feeling the weight of her words. I understand, I said. All I'm asking for is a chance to prove myself. There was a long silence, the kind that stretched out in the space between us, but I didn't mind it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was where I needed to be. The little girl looked up at her mother, waiting for her response, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something new in the mother's eyes, a glimmer of possibility. Okay, she said, her voice barely audible. We'll see. And just like that, the door had opened, and I had taken the first step into a world I never expected to find. A world that was messy, imperfect, but full of hope, warmth, and the kind of love I hadn't known I was looking for. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I was willing to try. For the first time, I was ready to do whatever it took to help them build the life they deserved. I walked back into their apartment the next day, feeling a strange sense of purpose I had never experienced before. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and the small room, despite its humble appearance, felt different today. There was a new energy in the air. Maybe it was the possibility of change or the hope that had begun to take root. I had promised them that I wasn't going to walk away, that I would be here for the long haul, and today I was determined to prove it. The little girl, whose name I had learned was Maya, was sitting by the window, watching the traffic pass by. Her mother, Lena, was busy cooking something on the stove, the scent of simmering vegetables filling the small space. It felt like a normal day, but something told me it wasn't. Something inside me had shifted. I could see the uncertainty in Lena's eyes when I had offered help. She was still cautious, still guarded, but I wasn't about to give up. I approached Maya first. She looked up from the window, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. Hey, I said, my voice gentle, trying not to disturb the calm in the room. How's everything going? Maya smiled, though it was a little unsure, as if she was still waiting for something. Okay, she replied. I drew something for you. She pulled out a piece of paper, crumpled at the edges, but still holding the marks of her little hands. It was a drawing of a house, much like the one from before, but this time there were 3 figures in front of it, a man, a woman, and a little girl. That's us, she said simply. We'll all be together here. My heart squeezed at her innocence, the purity of her belief. It's beautiful, Maya, I said, sitting down next to her. I think we can make that happen. Her face brightened, and for a moment, I allowed myself to believe it too. Lena came over to join us, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She stood there for a moment, watching us before speaking. I don't want to get my hopes up, she said quietly, her voice holding a hint of vulnerability. I know you're trying to help, but, she trailed off, not finishing the sentence. I understood. She had seen too many promises broken, too many people offer help and then disappear when things got hard. I get it, I said, my voice steady. I'm not going anywhere, Lena. I'm here because I believe in this, in both of you, and I'm going to prove it. She didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at me, and I could see the walls she had built around herself begin to crack, just a little. I'm not asking for anything in return, I continued, my voice softer now. I just want to help. Not with money, not with things, but with something real. I want to help build a future for you two. There was a long pause. The air between us was thick with uncertainty, but also something else, a kind of unspoken understanding. Finally, Lena spoke. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "It's not that I don't want to. It's just," she didn't finish her sentence, but I knew what she meant. Trust wasn't easy, not when you had been let down so many times. "I don't want you to trust me right away," I said, looking her in the eyes. "I just want a chance to show you I'm serious." Maya had been watching us quietly, but now she spoke up. "Does that mean we can live in the big house?" Her question, so simple and full of hope, made me smile despite everything. "It doesn't mean we're there yet," I replied, "but it's a step closer." Maya's face lit up, and for the first time, I saw the girl I had met the other day, her innocence, her hope, shining through. "I think we'll be okay," she whispered to herself, almost as if she was trying to convince herself more than anyone else. I looked at Lena, who was watching us both, still unsure but less distant. "I'll help you, Lena," I said. "I know I can't fix everything, but I can be here. And I'm not going anywhere." She nodded slowly, her eyes still filled with doubt, but also a spark of something else. Hope, perhaps. We sat there for a while, Maya playing with her drawing and Lena and I talking about small things, like what she needed for the apartment and how we could start planning for a better future. The conversation was awkward at first, like two people who had never really learned to trust one another. But it was real, and that's all I had wanted from the beginning, something real. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew that. There would be struggles, there would be setbacks. But in that moment, I felt like we had taken the first step towards something better. I couldn't promise them everything, but I could promise that I would show up, that I would be there for them, no matter what. "You know," Lena said, breaking the silence, "I never thought I'd be sitting here, talking to someone like you. But I'm glad you came back." I smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "Me too," I said quietly. "Me too." I woke up the next morning with a strange sense of urgency. The decision had been made, but the reality of it was beginning to set in. Lena and Maya were starting to trust me, but I knew that wasn't enough. I needed to prove myself, to show them that I wasn't just another person offering empty promises. I had to be different, and I had to be consistent. I got dressed quickly and drove to their apartment. When I arrived, Lena was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, looking out the window. Maya was in the other room, playing with the toys I had brought the day before. The apartment was quiet, peaceful, but there was still a sense of heaviness in the air. I could feel it, and I knew they could too. "Good morning," I said, stepping into the room. Lena turned to look at me, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Morning," she replied, her voice soft. "How's Maya?" "She's good," I said, trying to sound confident. "She's playing with the toys you brought her." Lena nodded, her eyes shifting to the coffee in her hands. I could tell she was still processing everything that had happened in the past few days. It wasn't easy to trust someone, especially when you've been let down before. "I've been thinking," I said, breaking the silence, "about what we talked about yesterday." Lena looked up at me, her gaze steady. "And I want to help you both get a fresh start," I said, my voice firm. "But I can't do it alone. I need you to trust me, and I need you to trust that I'll be here for the long haul. No shortcuts, no promises I can't keep. Just real help." Lena was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. I could see the hesitation in her eyes. "You're asking me to trust you," she said finally. "And I don't know if I can." "Not yet." I nodded. "I understand. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm here to stay. I'll show you I mean it." She looked at me for a long time, and for a moment, I wondered if she would say anything more. But then she spoke, her voice quieter now. "I want to believe you," she said. "But it's hard. I've spent so much time keeping my guard up, protecting Maya from people who say one thing and do another. It's not easy to just let that go." "I know," I said, my voice softening. "But you don't have to do it alone anymore. You don't have to protect her by shutting everyone out. I want to help. I don't expect anything in return. I just want you to feel safe, and I want Maya to have the future she deserves." The silence between us stretched on, thick with unspoken words and emotions. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Trust didn't come overnight. But I also knew that this was the only way forward. Maya appeared in the doorway, holding her drawing from the day before. "I finished the picture," she said, holding it up proudly. Lena looked at it, her expression softening just a little. It's beautiful, sweetheart, she said, her voice full of warmth. I smiled, feeling a small glimmer of hope. This was the first time I had seen Lena let her guard down just a bit. She wasn't completely open yet, but she was beginning to let herself believe in the possibility of something better. I stood up and walked over to Maya, looking at the picture she had drawn. It was the same house, the same big tree, but this time, there was a little dog in the yard and a swing hanging from one of the branches. I think that's perfect, I said. A house with a swing and a dog. That's exactly what you deserve. Maya beamed, her face lighting up at the compliment. Maybe one day, we'll live there, she said, her voice full of hope. I looked over at Lena, who was watching us quietly. We will, I said, my voice steady. We will. It's just going to take some time. She nodded, her eyes distant. I don't know how to start over, she said, almost to herself. I've been surviving, just getting by. But now, I feel like I have to start believing that things can be different. I reached out and gently placed my hand on her shoulder. We'll do it together, I said. One step at a time. We spent the rest of the morning talking about what they needed, about the future, and what it would take to build something better. We discussed finding a new place to live, and I promised to help with anything they needed, whether it was finding a job for Lena or helping Maya with school. It wasn't going to be easy. There were going to be days when things felt impossible, when doubts crept in, but I was committed to being there every step of the way. As I left their apartment that day, I felt a sense of purpose settle over me. This was the start of something new, not just for them, but for me as well. I wasn't just helping them build a life, I was building one with them. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I woke up the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. It had been a few weeks since I made the promise to Lena and Maya, and while things were slowly starting to change, there was still so much more to be done. It was like building a house from the ground up, and the foundation had only just begun to take shape. I had been spending more time with them, learning about their needs, their dreams, and their struggles. Every day, I could feel myself getting more invested, not just in helping them, but in becoming a part of their lives. It was a journey I hadn't expected to take, but it was one I wasn't ready to turn away from. I sat down at my desk that morning, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I was still navigating my own complicated life, work, responsibilities, and my own emotional baggage, but this was different. This wasn't just a business decision or an obligation. It was a chance to do something real, something meaningful. I pulled up the file with their details, Lena's job history, Maya's school records, everything I needed to understand to help them properly. But as I looked at the numbers and the facts, something caught my attention. A name. Dimitri. It wasn't just a name. It was the name of someone I knew from my past. Someone who had always been in the background. A figure I had tried to forget. Dimitri had been one of my closest colleagues in the early years of my career, a brilliant strategist who had helped me build my empire. But there was something about him that had always unsettled me. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I had cut ties with him years ago after a falling out that still left a bitter taste in my mouth. But now, seeing his name attached to their situation, it felt like a coincidence, and it didn't sit right with me. I had to know more. I grabbed my coat and left the house, the cold air hitting me as I stepped out onto the street. The weight of the decision settled on my shoulders. I couldn't ignore this. I had to figure out what Dimitri's involvement was in all of this. What was his connection to Lena and Maya? And why did it feel like something was off? I drove to the address I had found in the file, a small, rundown office building on the outskirts of the city. The building looked abandoned, the windows covered in grime, the door barely hanging on its hinges. It was the kind of place where shady deals were made, where people went when they had something to hide. I pushed the door open and walked inside. The air smelled stale, the flickering lights casting an eerie glow on the cracked tile floor. A receptionist sat behind the desk, her eyes tired and unfocused as she glanced up at me. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat. "I'm looking for Dimitri," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She raised an eyebrow. "You're not the first one," she muttered, clearly not interested in engaging further. I could feel my frustration building, but I kept my cool. "I need to speak with him," I said, my voice firm. "It's important." She hesitated for a moment before pointing down the hallway. "Room 3. But you didn't hear it from me." I nodded and walked down the narrow corridor, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the silence. As I reached the door to room 3, I paused for a moment. This was it. The moment that could change everything. I knocked lightly, but the door creaked open before I had a chance to knock again. Dmitri stood in front of me, his face cold, calculating. His eyes narrowed as he took in my presence. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low. "I need answers," I said, stepping inside. "What do you have to do with Lena and Maya?" Dmitri's expression darkened, but he didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to his desk and grabbed a file. He opened it slowly, as if savoring the moment. "You're asking the wrong questions," he said finally, his voice edged with something I couldn't quite place. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice rising. "What's going on with them?" Dmitri turned toward me, his eyes cold and calculating. "You think you're helping them?" he asked, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're just a pawn in a much bigger game, my friend." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What game?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dmitri walked toward me, his footsteps slow and deliberate. "The game you're playing is not one you can win. Lena and Maya are just pieces on a board. You think you're doing good, but you're just being used." I stared at him, my mind racing. "Used by who?" Dmitri didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed me a piece of paper with a name written on it. "This is who's really pulling the strings," he said, his voice low. I looked down at the name, and my heart stopped. It was someone I knew, someone I hadn't expected to be involved. The truth was starting to unfold in front of me, but I wasn't ready for it. Dmitri smiled, his eyes glinting with something dark. "The question isn't what you're going to do now," he said. "The question is, what are you willing to sacrifice to keep playing?" I stood there, frozen, as the weight of his words sank in. Everything I thought I knew about helping Lena and Maya was now in question. The game was much bigger than I had imagined, and I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't turn back from. I left Dmitri's office feeling more conflicted than ever. His words echoed in my mind like a constant hum, and the name he had handed me burned in my memory. It was someone I never would have expected to be involved in this mess. But there it was, a name that connected everything I had been trying to piece together. I needed to figure out who was behind all of this, who was manipulating things from the shadows. I had come to this city with the intention of helping Lena and Maya, but now it seemed like I had stumbled into something much deeper, something far more dangerous than I had ever anticipated. As I drove back to the apartment, I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I couldn't let this go. I had made a promise to Lena and Maya, and I wasn't about to back down now. But the stakes were higher than I realized, and the lines between right and wrong were becoming increasingly blurred. When I got back, Lena was sitting on the couch, Maya curled up next to her. They both looked up when I entered, and I could see the concern in Lena's eyes. "What happened?" she asked, her voice soft but laced with worry. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before I spoke. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm. Lena looked at me, her eyes searching mine for any hint of what was going on. "About what?" she asked, her tone cautious. I could see the walls she had built around herself starting to go up again. "About everything," I said. "I know I told you I would help, but there's more to this than I realized. There are people involved in all of this, people who want to control what happens to you and Maya." Lena's face shifted, the confusion and fear becoming evident. "What do you mean? Who are these people?" I hesitated, not sure how much I should reveal. But I couldn't keep this from her. "Not now. I don't know everything yet," I said. "But I'm going to find out. There's someone named Dmitri who's involved. He's been manipulating things behind the scenes. And the person who's really pulling the strings is someone I never expected to be connected to this." Lena sat up, her eyes widening in alarm. "Who?" she asked, her voice a mix of fear and disbelief. I looked at her, trying to gauge her reaction. "I can't say yet," I said, my voice low. "But I need you to trust me. I'll get to the bottom of this. I won't let them control you, or Maya." Lena shook her head, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can trust you," she whispered. "You've only been here for a short time, and now you're telling me there are people trying to control us? It's too much. I don't know what to believe anymore." Her words stung, but I understood where she was coming from. Trust was hard to come by, especially when you had been burned before. "I get it," I said, my voice softening. "I'm asking a lot, I know, but I'm not going to back down. I'm not going anywhere. I'll protect you both, I promise." Maya looked up at me, her wide eyes filled with confusion. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice small. I crouched down in front of her, trying to put her at ease. Nothing's going to happen to you, Maya, I said gently. But there are some things we need to figure out. You're safe here with us. She nodded slowly, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. I hated that she had to worry about any of this. She should have been focusing on being a kid, not dealing with adult problems. I know it's scary, I said, trying to reassure both of them. But we'll face it together. I'll take care of everything. You just need to trust me. Lena looked at me, her expression softening just a little. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll trust you. But if this goes south, if things get worse, we're out of here. I nodded. I understand. And I won't let it go that far. I'll figure this out. As I stood up, I could see that Maya was still holding on to the drawing she had made for me. It was the same house, with the dog, the swing, and the big tree in front. It was the house of her dreams. I took the drawing from her and smiled. This is a beautiful picture, Maya, I said, my voice full of sincerity. And I believe it's a dream that's going to come true. Her face lit up, and for a moment, I saw the hope in her eyes that had been absent when I first met her. You really think so? She asked, her voice full of wonder. I do, I said, giving her a reassuring smile. I promise. As I left the apartment later that afternoon, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. There were so many questions, so many layers to this situation that I hadn't even begun to unravel. But I couldn't stop now. Lena and Maya were counting on me, and I wasn't going to let them down. I had to find out who was behind all of this. Dimitri's involvement was just the tip of the iceberg. I had no idea where this road would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't walking away. Not now. Not ever. I woke up early the next morning, feeling the weight of everything that had happened weighing on me. The promise I had made to Lena and Maya was still fresh in my mind, and I knew that today would be the day I had to follow through. I couldn't let them down, not after all the progress we had made. The situation with Dimitri and the mysterious forces behind him was still looming over me, and I needed to figure out who was orchestrating all of this. I couldn't afford to wait any longer. I dressed quickly, gathered my things, and drove straight to the office. I needed to confront Dimitri and anyone else involved. I couldn't let them continue pulling strings in the shadows. It was time to expose everything. When I walked into the building, I immediately headed toward the elevator. The lights flickered above me, casting a cold, sterile glow across the walls. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, like I was walking into a trap I had no idea how to avoid. But I had no choice. I had to confront the truth. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped inside, my mind racing. The floor numbers ticked up slowly, each one feeling like a countdown to something I couldn't control. I thought about Lena and Maya. I thought about the promises I had made and how close we were to a real chance at a better life. But that chance was at risk, and I couldn't let it slip away. The elevator came to a stop with a soft jerk, and the door slid open. I stepped out, my heart pounding in my chest. Dimitri's office was at the end of the hall, a sleek, polished space that looked cold and impersonal. I knocked on the door before entering, not waiting for permission. Dimitri was sitting behind his desk, his eyes focused on a file in front of him. He looked up when he heard the door open, and his expression immediately shifted from calm to guarded. You, he said, his voice low and steady. I didn't expect you to show up here again. I didn't expect to be back either. I replied, my voice steady. But I need answers. You've been pulling strings behind the scenes, and I won't stand by while you manipulate Lena and Maya. Dimitri's eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything. He just sat there, staring at me, as if trying to figure out his next move. You think you know everything, don't you? He said finally. You think you can just waltz in and fix everything. But you don't understand the game. You never did. I stepped closer to the desk, my fists clenched. Then explain it to me. Explain why you've been involved in this. Why you're trying to control them. Dimitri leaned back in his chair, his hands folded in front of him. I don't need to explain anything. To you, he said coldly. I'm just a player in this. There's someone bigger behind all of this. You should know that by now. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Who? I demanded. Who's behind all of this? Dimitri didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at me, his eyes cold and calculating. It's not about who's behind it, he said finally. It's about who's in control. And trust me, it's not you. I felt a surge of anger, but I held it in check. I'm not here to play games, Dimitri. I'm here to end this. Whatever you're involved in, it ends now. Dimitri smirked, a look of amusement crossing his face. "You don't get it, do you?" he asked, his tone mocking. "This isn't something you can fix. This is bigger than you. Bigger than anyone." I stood there for a moment, trying to process what he was saying. Dmitri had always been a master manipulator, but now I was starting to see just how deep his influence ran. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice low. "What's your endgame?" Dmitri leaned forward, his eyes never leaving mine. "What I want doesn't matter," he said slowly. "What matters is what happens when you're out of the picture. You think you can stop this? You can't. There's more at play here than you realize." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle on me. This wasn't just about Lena and Maya anymore. This was about something much bigger, something I couldn't afford to ignore. "So what happens now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Dmitri smiled, a thin, cold smile. "Now, we see if you're willing to play the game. If you can keep up, maybe you'll make it out alive. If not, well, you'll find out what happens next." I turned on my heel, walking out of his office without another word. As I made my way back to the elevator, I felt the weight of his words pressing down on me. The game had just begun, and I was caught in the middle of it. I couldn't back down now. I had promised Lena and Maya I would protect them. But it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about the truth, and about finding out who was really pulling the strings. As I stepped into the elevator, I looked up at the ceiling, taking a deep breath. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I left Dimitri's office with my head spinning. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air, and despite every ounce of my will telling me to stay focused on Lena and Maya, I couldn't ignore the bigger picture anymore. Dmitri had made it clear there was something much larger than what I had originally thought, something much more dangerous at play. And I was right in the middle of it, stuck between the promises I made to Lena and Maya and the web of control that seemed to stretch far beyond my reach. I couldn't let them down, though. They trusted me. As I sat in my car, my mind raced. I had made a vow to help Lena and Maya. They were counting on me, but now I felt like I was just a pawn in a game I didn't fully understand. What did Dmitri mean by there being more to this than I realized? Who was truly behind the scenes? My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a text from Lena. "Maya's been asking about you. Are you coming by tonight?" Her message was simple, but it hit me hard. Maya, the little girl who had looked at me with so much hope, the one who had asked if I could live with them. I couldn't let her down. I couldn't back away now. I texted back, "I'll be there soon. We need to talk." When I arrived at their apartment, Lena greeted me at the door, her face tired but softer than the last time I saw her. "We can talk, but it's late," she said, stepping aside to let me in. I followed her inside, where Maya was sitting at the small table, drawing again. This time, the picture was different. It was of a family, with 3 people and a dog. The swing was still there, and the tree stood tall in the background. "I finished it," Maya said, looking up with a shy smile as she handed me the drawing. "This is the family I want." Her words pierced through me. This wasn't just a child's dream anymore. This was something more. This was her hope. I smiled at her, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a beautiful picture, Maya," I said, sitting down beside her. "You're going to get that family. We're going to make it happen." Lena, who had been standing quietly by the kitchen, turned to face us. "What's going on, really?" she asked, her voice steady, but there was a hint of uncertainty. "You said we needed to talk." I took a deep breath, looking at both of them. I could see the fear and the hope in Lena's eyes, the same look that Maya wore every time she asked me if things were going to get better. "I've been looking into things," I began, choosing my words carefully. "And I'm not going to lie to you. There are people involved in this. People who've been trying to control everything. Dmitri is just one part of it." I saw Lena's face tighten, her brow furrowing in concern. "Who else?" she asked quietly. "Who's really behind all of this?" "I don't have all the answers yet," I said, shaking my head. "But I know this, it's bigger than what we thought. Dmitri is just a pawn, but he's connected to someone else. Someone who has the power to destroy everything we're trying to build." The room grew heavy, the weight of my words sinking in. Lena stood there for a moment, processing what I had said. She had been through so much, and now this. More danger, more uncertainty. But she didn't flinch. "So what do we do?" she asked, her voice calm but resolute. "We fight," I said, my voice steady. "We stay strong, and we face whatever comes. I'm not backing down, and I need you and Maya to stay with me. This isn't just about getting out of the mess we're in. It's about taking control of our lives, our future. Maya looked up at me, her eyes wide. We're going to be okay, right? She asked, her voice small but full of hope. I looked at her, my heart aching. Yes, Maya, I said, my voice full of determination. We're going to be okay. We're going to make sure of it. Lena stepped closer, her hand resting on Maya's shoulder. She nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. All right, she said quietly. We'll fight. Together. I smiled, relief washing over me. We had a long road ahead of us, but for the first time, I felt like we were really in this together. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were fighting for something real, something worth having. That night, we talked more about what needed to be done, about the steps we could take to protect ourselves, and about the future we could build if we stuck together. There was still so much unknown, but we weren't going to face it alone. The morning came, and I could already feel the weight of the day ahead. I had made some calls and started to put plans into motion, but things were moving fast now. I wasn't sure where it would all lead, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Dmitri or anyone else control us. We would take back control, piece by piece. I left their apartment that morning with a new resolve, knowing that the fight had just begun. But this time, I wasn't alone. And this time, I was ready to fight for something that mattered. I woke up the next morning with a heavy heart, the weight of the decisions I had made the day before pressing on my chest. Lena and Maya had agreed to fight, to stick together, but I knew the road ahead was not going to be easy. Dmitri was still out there, and I knew that the people behind him weren't going to back off without a fight. The question was, how far would they go to keep their control over Lena and Maya's lives? I had promised them that I would protect them, and I wasn't about to back down. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about my next steps. I had already made arrangements for Lena and Maya to move into a safer place, away from the dangers they had been living with for so long. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I had also contacted a few trusted people, some from my past, some from the connections I had made over the years, to help dig into Dmitri's involvement. But I knew that was just the surface. The deeper I went, the more I realized that the world I was stepping into was far darker than I had ever imagined. I could feel the tension building, the stakes growing higher. Lena and Maya were relying on me, and I couldn't let them down. I needed to find a way to break this cycle, to expose the people, pulling the strings, and end this before it was too late. I called Lena later that morning to check in. Hey, how are you doing? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. We're okay, she replied, but I could hear the unease in her voice. Maya's been asking about you. She's still excited, but I think she's also starting to feel the weight of everything that's going on. It's hard for her to understand why everything has changed so suddenly. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I understood. Maya was just a kid. She shouldn't have to worry about these things. But her hope, her belief that they could have a better life, kept me going. I'll be there soon, I said, trying to reassure her. We'll figure this out together. Just stay safe, all right? I know. We'll be here, Lena said. Just be careful. I'm not sure who you're dealing with, but I don't want you getting too deep into this without knowing what you're up against. Her words hit home. I knew she was right. Dmitri and the people behind him weren't just going to walk away. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. After hanging up, I spent the rest of the morning coordinating with a few people I trusted. I reached out to an old friend, someone I knew from my early days in business, who had connections in the legal world. I needed to know more about the people I was up against, and I needed someone who could help me navigate the legal complexities that were inevitably going to come with trying to take them down. As I made the call, I could feel the pressure mounting. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep the corruption went. Dmitri was just one small player in a much bigger game. The people behind him were dangerous, and they would stop at nothing to maintain their control. But I wasn't about to back down. I couldn't. For Lena, for Maya, for the future I had promised them. Later that afternoon, I went to see Lena and Maya. The apartment was quiet when I arrived, and I could see that Maya was lost in thought, her drawing still on the table. She looked up when I entered, her face lighting up as she saw me. You came back, she said, her voice full of hope. Of course, I did, I replied, sitting down next to her. We're in this together, remember? Maya smiled, but there was something in her eyes that told me she still didn't fully understand the gravity of what we were facing. I made something for you, she said, pulling out another drawing. This one was different. It wasn't a house or a family, but a picture of a tree. It was simple, just a tall, strong tree with roots deep in the ground. "This is for you," she said. "So you stay here with us. Like the tree. Strong. Forever." My heart clenched at her words. This little girl had more faith in me than I had in myself. She saw something in me that I hadn't even seen in myself yet. "It's beautiful, Maya," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "Thank you." Lena, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "She believes in you," she said softly. "She believes that we can have that life you promised. I don't know if I can promise that to her, but I know you're trying. And that's enough for me. For now." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. It wasn't just about promises anymore. It was about building something real, something that could last. We spent the rest of the evening talking, planning, and preparing. I knew that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but we had come this far, and I wasn't about to stop now. As the night wore on, I couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in years. Lena and Maya had become my anchor, my reason to keep pushing forward. Together, we were going to fight for a future that was worth having. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take it from us. I woke up the next morning with a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in years. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind, filled with late-night discussions, frantic planning, and a growing sense that time was running out. But today felt different. I had made a promise to Lena and Maya, and despite everything that was happening behind the scenes, I wasn't about to back down. They had put their trust in me, and I was going to keep fighting for them. As I prepared for the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls around us were closing in. Dmitri and his associates were getting bolder, and I knew that soon they would make their move. But I wasn't going to wait around for that to happen. It was time to take control of the situation before it got any worse. I spent the morning putting together the final details for Lena and Maya's new place. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A safe space where they could begin to rebuild their lives without fear of being dragged back into the mess I had been trying to protect them from. I had made calls to a few trusted people, including my old friend in the legal world. He had promised to help me dig into the connections between Dmitri and the people pulling his strings, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. The deeper we dug, the more complicated things got. By mid-afternoon, I found myself standing in front of Lena and Maya's apartment door, ready to talk to them about the next steps. I took a deep breath before knocking. I didn't know how much longer I could keep them safe, but I was determined to try. Lena opened the door and greeted me with a tight smile. She looked exhausted, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes that made me believe we could get through this. "How are you?" she asked, her voice low. "We're okay," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "I've got everything set up. You'll have a new place to go by the end of the week. It's not much, but it's safe." Lena's expression softened, and for the first time in a while, I saw a flicker of relief in her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I know you're doing everything you can, but I still don't know what's going to happen next. The more I think about it, the scarier it gets." I nodded, understanding. I had been living in fear too. Fear of the unknown, fear of not being able to protect them, fear that we were running out of time. "I know," I said, my voice steady. "But we're not alone in this. We'll face whatever comes together. That's what matters." Lena didn't say anything for a moment, just watched me closely. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared for Maya. I don't want her to grow up in a world like this. A world where we can't trust anyone, where we can't feel safe." The words hit me harder than I expected. It was easy for me to talk about fighting back, about taking control, but I hadn't truly thought about what it meant for Lena and Maya. They had been living in fear for so long, and I had only just started to see the full weight of that. "We'll give her a chance," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "A chance to grow up in a world where she can feel safe, where she can have a future. That's what we're fighting for, Lena. That's why we have to keep going." Maya walked into the room then, her drawing clutched in her hands. She looked up at me with a smile, and for a moment, I felt the warmth of her hope fill the room. "I finished my picture," she said, her voice bright with excitement. She handed me the drawing, and I could see that it had changed. This time, it wasn't just a house and a tree. It was a whole town, with houses lined up in rows, each one with a little garden and a dog in the yard. "It's our home," she said, her eyes wide with innocence and determination. "We'll all live here, together." I looked at the picture, my heart swelling with emotion. It was everything she had ever wanted, a place where she could feel safe, where she could grow up without fear. It was everything I had promised her, everything I had promised myself. It's beautiful, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And it's going to happen, Maya. We'll make sure of it. Lena stepped closer, looking down at the picture with a soft smile. I can't thank you enough, she said quietly. I never thought I'd be able to give Maya the life she deserves. But you've given us hope. You've given me hope. I placed a hand on her shoulder, my heart heavy with the weight of everything we had been through. You don't have to thank me, I said, my voice steady. We're in this together. We'll keep fighting, and we'll get there. As we talked more about the future, I could feel the sense of uncertainty beginning to lift. We didn't have all the answers yet, and there was still a long road ahead, but for the first time, I felt like we were on the right path. And that was enough. I left their apartment that evening with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in weeks. The fight wasn't over, but it was no longer about just surviving. It was about building something new, something worth fighting for. I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from us. I stood in front of the apartment, my heart heavy with everything that had been happening over the past few days. The weight of the situation was pressing down on me. Lena and Maya were getting closer to safety, but I knew it wouldn't last forever. The danger from Dmitri and his mysterious allies was real, and it was only a matter of time before they made their next move. But I wasn't going to sit back and wait. Not anymore. I had already made the decision to help them, and I wasn't backing down. I rang the doorbell, trying to push away the doubt that had started creeping in. Lena answered the door with a weary smile, but I could see the tension in her eyes. What's going on? She asked, her voice calm, but with an undercurrent of worry. I think we need to talk, I said, stepping inside. Maya was sitting at the table, working on one of her drawings, a bright and hopeful look still lingering on her face despite everything that had happened. I've made some calls, I continued. I've learned a lot, and it's worse than I thought. Dmitri isn't just involved in this. There's a whole network behind him, pulling the strings. Lena's face darkened, the worry deepening in her eyes. Who else is involved? She asked, her voice tight with fear. I didn't want to scare her, but I couldn't sugarcoat the truth. I don't know yet, I admitted. But it's someone powerful. Someone who won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to keep things under control. I need to protect you both, but we need to act fast. Lena nodded, her hand tightening on Maya's shoulder. We'll do whatever it takes, she said quietly. We've been through so much, but we can't keep living like this. I won't let them win. I looked at Maya, her innocent face still filled with hope, and I felt a surge of determination. We're going to fix this, I said firmly. I promise. The next few days were a blur. I spent every waking moment making plans, reaching out to contacts I hadn't spoken to in years, trying to dig deeper into the network behind Dmitri. It wasn't easy. The people I was dealing with were dangerous, ruthless. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I had made a vow to protect Lena and Maya, and I wasn't about to let anything stand in my way. Every time I looked at Maya, I saw the trust she had in me. The same trust that had made her ask if I could live with them. It was a simple question, but it had become something so much bigger. It was about her future, and I would fight for that future, no matter what it took. One night, just as I was about to head to bed, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me not to. Hello. I answered, my voice cautious. You're playing a dangerous game, a low voice said on the other end. My heart skipped a beat. It was Dmitri. What do you want? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I know what you're trying to do, he said. And I'm telling you now, stay out of it. You have no idea what you're up against. I'm not backing down, I said firmly. I'll protect Lena and Maya, no matter what it takes. Dmitri chuckled, the sound sending a chill down my spine. You think you can protect them? You're already too late. This isn't something you can fix. You're just a pawn in this game, and you'll never win. The line went dead, and I stared at my phone, my heart racing. I didn't know what his words meant yet, but I knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to stop, and neither was I. I spent the next few hours in deep thought. Dmitri was playing a dangerous game, but he had underestimated me. I wasn't going to let him win, not when Lena and Maya were depending on me. I knew I needed to step up my efforts, make moves that would shake things up. I couldn't do this alone anymore. I needed to bring in help. People who understood the game Dmitri was playing. People who had the power and resources to go up against him. The next day, I made more calls, reaching out to some old colleagues, people who had been part of my life before everything changed. They were hesitant at first, But once I explained the situation, they understood. This was bigger than just one person's fight. This was about protecting the innocent, about fighting back against the people who had taken everything from Lena and Maya. As the days went on, things started to fall into place. We had a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best chance we had, and I wasn't about to waste it. The danger was real, but so was the hope. Lena and Maya had trusted me, and I wasn't going to let them down. That evening, as I sat with them in the small apartment, I could feel the tension in the air. But there was something else too, something stronger than fear. It was determination. And for the first time, I truly believed we could win this fight. We're in this together, I said, looking at Lena and Maya. And no matter what happens, we're not giving up. We'll keep fighting for the life you deserve. Lena nodded, her eyes filled with quiet strength. We're with you, she said softly. All the way. And in that moment, I knew we were going to make it through this. We were going to fight back, together. I woke up with a sense of urgency, the weight of the last few days settling in on my chest. Things were escalating. The plan we had put into motion was starting to take shape, but the danger was closer than ever, and Dimitri's words from the night before still echoed in my head. You're just a pawn in this game, and you'll never win. His mocking tone haunted me. He had been right about one thing. This wasn't a simple fight. This was a battle on a much larger scale, and we had to be ready. I had already promised Lena and Maya that we would face it together, but the reality was much more daunting than I had imagined. There was no turning back now. I couldn't afford to fail them. I spent the morning going over every detail of our plan, trying to figure out how we could take down the network Dimitri was part of. But with each new lead, the more complicated it became. Every person I spoke to seemed to be connected in some way, and the deeper I dug, the more I realized how many people were involved. The conspiracy was vast, and I was beginning to wonder if we could even make a dent in it. But the thought of Lena and Maya, their faces full of hope, kept me going. I couldn't let them down. I couldn't let their lives be ruined because I was afraid to face the truth. That afternoon, I met with a few trusted allies. We gathered in a small, secure room in a building on the outskirts of town. The group was small, but each person had a vital role to play. I needed to ensure we had every angle covered. As we discussed the plan, I could see the tension on everyone's faces. We all knew the risks. Taking down an entire network, especially one as dangerous as this, would be no easy feat. We need to move fast, I said, my voice steady despite the nerves that were gnawing at me. Dimitri's people won't wait around, and neither can we. We have one chance at this, and we can't afford any mistakes. My colleague, Ben, who had connections in law enforcement, nodded. We've got eyes on a few key players, but there's a lot of moving parts. We need more information before we make our move. I agree, I said, but we don't have time to wait for all the pieces to fall into place. We need to act now, while we still have the element of surprise. Lena and Maya's safety is on the line. We can't afford to let them become targets. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Ben and the others knew what was at stake. They knew how far this could go. All right, Ben said after a long pause. We'll get the intel we need, but you're right. We can't waste any more time. Let's make sure we have everything locked down before we take action. I nodded. Good. Keep me updated. I left the meeting with a heavy heart, knowing that the final steps of our plan were already in motion. But the weight of what was coming next was hard to ignore. As I returned to Lena and Maya's apartment, I tried to keep my composure. Lena was sitting at the table when I walked in, her eyes filled with worry. Maya was in the other room, playing with the same picture she had drawn for me. The one of the house, the swing, the dog, her dream of the life she wanted. It was hard to look at it without feeling a sharp pang of guilt. I had promised her that dream, and now I was putting it all on the line. How are you? Lena asked, her voice quiet. We're getting closer, I said, trying to sound reassuring. We have a plan, but it's going to take everything we've got to make it work. Lena looked at me, her eyes searching for any sign of doubt. I'm scared, she said, her voice breaking. I don't want Maya to get hurt. I don't want her to lose the only hope she has left. I sat down next to her, my heart heavy with the weight of her words. I know, I said softly. I know, but we're doing everything we can to protect her. And you. I'm not going to let anything happen to you both. Maya walked into the room then, holding her drawing, a smile on her face. I want us to live here, she said, holding up the picture. Where we're safe. I looked at the drawing, my heart aching. It was a simple picture, but it meant everything to her. And it meant everything to me, too. We will, Maya, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I promise we will. Lena looked at me, her expression softening. I believe you, she said quietly. But I need to know we can make it. That will be okay. I took her hand in mine, squeezing it gently. We will be, I said. I won't let anything stand in the way of that. Later that evening, I got another call. It was Ben, his voice tight with urgency. We've got a lead, he said. It's big. They're planning something. We need to move now. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Where? We're meeting in an hour. Get ready. I hung up the phone and looked at Lena and Maya. They were in the other room, unaware of what was happening. I could feel the weight of the moment, the heaviness of the decision that was about to be made. This was it. We were taking our shot. The game had begun, and there was no turning back. I had to protect them, no matter what. I couldn't let anyone take their dream from them. I stood up, my resolve hardening. Tonight, we would take the first step toward ending this, toward making sure Lena and Maya had the life they deserved. But I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I knew there would be sacrifices, and I wasn't sure what the future would hold. But I was ready to face it. For them. I stood outside the safe house we had secured for Lena and Maya, the weight of the past few weeks pressing heavily on my shoulders. The urgency was undeniable. Dmitri and his people had escalated things. They weren't just sitting back anymore. They were moving fast, trying to tighten their grip on everything we were building. I wasn't sure how much longer we had before they made their move. I had been able to keep them in the dark, but I could feel the walls closing in. Our window of opportunity was shrinking fast. I had just come from a meeting with Ben, the contact in law enforcement who had been helping me gather intel. Things were moving quickly, and while we had learned more about the organization behind Dmitri, I was starting to realize just how far their reach went. We were up against more than just corrupt businessmen. We were up against a network of people willing to do anything to protect their interests, and they had resources at their disposal that could crush us. But none of that mattered. I had made a promise to Lena and Maya, and I wasn't going to back down. I couldn't. They were counting on me, and they deserved better than this. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and made my way into the building, my footsteps echoing on the cold concrete. When I entered the apartment, Lena was sitting at the table, her expression weary but resolute. Maya was drawing at the counter, humming to herself. For a moment, everything felt normal. But I knew the truth. We weren't safe. Not yet. Lena looked up when I entered, her eyes scanning my face for any signs of what was happening. What's going on? She asked quietly, her voice steady but filled with concern. I could see the unease in her eyes. She knew things were escalating too, but she was trying to hold it together for Maya. We need to move, I said, my voice calm but urgent. The danger is closer than we thought. Dmitri is making his next move, and we need to act fast. Lena's face paled slightly, but she didn't flinch. She had seen enough to know that this was serious. How soon? She asked. We're leaving tonight, I said. Everything is packed. We'll go somewhere safer. I've already made arrangements, and we'll be there by the end of the night. What about the plan? Lena asked, standing up from the table. What about Dmitri and everything we're trying to do? Are we just running away? I shook my head. No, this is a temporary move. We can't fight this if we're exposed. We need to be strategic. This isn't over yet, Lena. But right now, we need to stay safe. She looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing my words. She wasn't just worried about her own safety. She was worried about Maya. I could see the protective instinct in her eyes. But she nodded, finally understanding the need to take a step back. All right, she said quietly. But we're not giving up. I know, I said, giving her a reassuring smile. We're going to fight, but we need to be smart about it. Maya, who had been sitting quietly by the counter, looked up at us. Where are we going? She asked, her voice full of innocent curiosity. I kneeled down to her level, trying to keep things calm. We're going to a new place, I said gently. A safer place where you and your mom can rest for a little while. Maya smiled, the hope still in her eyes. Will there be a swing? She asked, her voice soft but full of hope. I couldn't help but smile at her question. Yes, Maya, I said, my voice steady. There will be a swing. We'll make sure of it. Lena smiled faintly at the exchange. She was doing her best to keep the mood light, but I could tell that the stress of everything was starting to wear on her. I'll get the rest of our things, she said, standing up and heading toward the bedroom. I watched her for a moment, grateful for her strength. She was doing this for Maya, for the future they both deserved. I wasn't going to let them down. We'll leave in about an hour, I called to Lena. I'll make sure everything is set up, and we'll get out of here as soon as we can. I turned back to Maya, who was busy drawing again. Are you still drawing your house? I asked, kneeling next to her. She nodded, holding up the picture. It's the best house ever, she said, her voice filled with excitement. It's where we're going to live. I looked at the drawing, my heart swelling. It was the same house from before, but now there was a little swing under the tree and a dog sitting by the front door. It was simple, but it was everything Maya dreamed of. It was everything they both deserved. It's beautiful, Maya, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And we will make that house a reality. I promise. As we prepared to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The more I learned, the more I realized how much danger we were in. But I couldn't let that stop me. I had made a promise to Lena and Maya, and I wasn't going to back down. We would get through this, and we would build a future together, one step at a time. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living, about building something better, no matter the cost. I watched as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the small house where we were hiding. The safe house was supposed to be temporary, just a place to lay low until we figured out our next move. But the walls felt like they were closing in faster than I had anticipated. Dimitri's people were getting closer, and I could feel the pressure mounting. I had made promises to Lena and Maya. I couldn't let them down now, not when we were so close to finally having a future without fear. As the days passed, we kept to ourselves, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The phone calls I had made, the plans I had set in motion, it all felt like a game of cat and mouse. Every move we made was a step closer to exposing the people behind this, but it also put us in greater danger. Lena had been quiet lately, more withdrawn. I could see the weight of everything bearing down on her. She was trying to stay strong for Maya, but I could tell it was taking its toll. I spent hours on the phone with contacts, trying to track down the people behind Dimitri, but nothing was moving fast enough. Every lead I got seemed to turn into a dead end, and it was starting to feel like we were being deliberately misled. I couldn't help but wonder if the people I was trusting were part of the same network, playing both sides to keep me off balance. I had to be careful. Every decision felt like it was life or death. It was late one evening when I received a call that made my heart skip a beat. It was Ben. We've got a problem, he said, his voice tight with urgency. There's a leak. Someone's tipped them off. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I'm not sure who yet, but Dimitri's people know where you are. You need to get out of there, now. Panic rose in my chest. I looked over at Lena, who had been sitting quietly by the window, watching Maya play. She looked up when she saw my expression change. What is it? She asked, her voice trembling with fear. I didn't have time to explain everything. We have to go? Now, I said, moving quickly to gather our things. I had no idea how long we had before they arrived. Lena didn't ask questions. She grabbed Maya's hand and moved toward the door. I looked back at the small room that had become our sanctuary, the place we thought we'd be safe. But safety had been a fleeting illusion. We can't stay here, I said, my voice shaking with the realization of how close we were to losing everything. I turned and led them down the hallway, my mind racing. I had a backup plan in place, a place we could go if things went south. But it wasn't the safe house we had hoped for. It was another temporary solution. I didn't know how much longer we could keep running. As we reached the car, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, fear, determination. I had been fighting for so long, and now it felt like everything we had worked for was crumbling in front of us. I didn't know how much longer I could keep this up, but I couldn't give in. I couldn't let Dimitri or anyone else take Maya and Lena's future away from them. I drove as fast as I could, the streets unfamiliar and dark, my eyes scanning every corner for any sign of pursuit. I had no idea how much time we had, but I couldn't risk being caught. We had to disappear. I thought about the drawing Maya had made for me, the picture of the house, the dog, the swing. I thought about how much hope she had placed in that dream, and how much I had promised her. I had to keep that promise, no matter the cost. We couldn't stop now. I glanced in the rearview mirror, the streets behind us empty for the moment. But the feeling of being chased, hunted, wouldn't leave me. It was too quiet. I didn't trust the silence. I pulled into the parking lot of an old motel I had used once before, a place no one would think to look for us. I parked the car and turned to Lena. She was holding Maya close, her face pale with fear. "We're okay," I said, trying to sound confident, though the words felt hollow in my mouth. "We just need to lay low for a while. I'm going to keep working on this, and we'll be out of this mess soon. I promise." Lena didn't speak at first. She just nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. I understood. I had promised her a future, but I didn't know how to get us there. All I knew was that I couldn't stop. We couldn't stop. We spent the next few days holed up in the motel, trying to stay out of sight. I kept my phone close, monitoring every lead, trying to piece together the puzzle. But nothing was falling into place. We were running out of time. The walls felt like they were closing in on us. It was a restless night when I finally got the call. It was Ben again. "We found them," he said, his voice low. "We know who's pulling the strings. It's someone you know. Someone close to you." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. "Who?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's not Dmitri," Ben said. "It's someone in your inner circle. Someone you've worked with for years. Someone you trust." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Who?" I asked again, this time louder. Ben hesitated before answering. "It's you, isn't it? You're the one who's been using us all along. The person who's been controlling everything from the start." The line went dead, and I stared at my phone, unable to comprehend what I had just heard. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. The game had changed. Everything I thought I knew was wrong. I had trusted the wrong person. I had been working with the enemy the whole time. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let this happen? My mind raced as I tried to process it all. And then I realized something. It wasn't over. Not yet. The fight was just beginning. I stood in the motel room, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of the shocking revelation Ben had just shared. The idea that someone within my own circle, someone I had trusted, was behind everything, felt like a betrayal I could barely comprehend. My hand was still gripping the phone, but the conversation had ended. I wasn't ready to face the truth, but I had no choice now. Whoever was behind this had manipulated everything, and I had been blind to it. My instincts told me that the web we were tangled in was much more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just Dmitri. It was someone I had known for years, someone I thought I could trust. It was like everything I had built, everything I had fought for, was a lie. I put the phone down and stared out the window, trying to find some clarity. I couldn't think straight. The feeling of being watched, of being controlled by forces I couldn't even see, was overwhelming. And worst of all, I had brought Lena and Maya into this. They were my responsibility, and now, they were in more danger than ever. I heard a knock at the door, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Lena. Her face was pale, and I could see the fear in her eyes. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with concern. I swallowed hard, trying to shake the anger and confusion that had settled in my chest. "It's worse than we thought," I said quietly. "There's someone inside my circle. Someone I thought was on our side." Lena stepped into the room, her expression growing more serious. "Who?" she asked, the fear in her voice rising. "I don't know yet," I said, my voice tight. "But I've got to find out. We're running out of time." Lena didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, her brow furrowed in concern. "You're doing everything you can," she said softly. "But I don't want you getting too deep into this. I know you're trying to protect us, but this is bigger than we thought. I don't want you getting hurt." Her words hit me hard, but they weren't a surprise. I had put so much into this fight, trying to protect them, trying to make everything right, but I hadn't stopped to consider the cost. The danger we were in, the people we were up against, it was all bigger than I had realized. "I won't stop," I said, looking at her with determination. "I promised you, and I promised Maya. I'm not backing down." Lena nodded slowly, but there was still hesitation in her eyes. "I know," she said quietly, "but you have to be careful. You're not just fighting for us anymore. You're fighting for yourself too." I looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. It was true. I had been so focused on protecting them that I hadn't really thought about what this was costing me. I hadn't realized how deep I had been drawn into this, how much of my own life I had sacrificed for something that seemed to be slipping through my fingers. "We're all in this together," I said finally, my voice steady. "And no matter what happens, I won't stop fighting for you." Lena didn't respond, but I could see the quiet understanding in her eyes. She knew. She understood. Maya came into the room then, holding her drawing again. This time, there was something different about it. The house, the swing, the dog. It was all there. But now, there was something else. A figure in the doorway. A person. A shadow. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she held the pencil so carefully, like she was trying to make sense of a world that didn't make sense. She handed the drawing to me without saying a word. I looked down at it, and my heart sank. The figure in the doorway wasn't just anyone. It was me, and she had drawn me standing there, just as I had been for weeks, trying to keep her safe, trying to make sure nothing could harm her or her mother. But the shadow in the doorway, it was dark. It was ominous. It was everything I feared. You're still going to keep us safe, right? Maya's voice was soft, her eyes searching mine for reassurance. I looked at her, my heart aching. Yes, Maya, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I will keep you safe. I promise you that. Lena watched the exchange, her expression softening. She had trusted me to protect them, and I wasn't about to break that trust. But as I stared at the drawing, at the figure in the doorway, I realized that the fight wasn't just about keeping them safe anymore. It was about confronting the darkness, confronting the forces that had been pulling the strings from the beginning. I didn't know who was behind it yet, but I knew one thing. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future. It was a fight for everything that Maya had dreamed of, for the life she had imagined when she drew that picture. The next few days were a blur. I kept making calls, trying to track down the people responsible for all of this. The deeper I dug, the more it became clear. This wasn't just about Dmitri or the network he was part of. This was about something much larger, something that had been in the works for years. The corruption ran deep, and the people behind it had no intention of letting go of their power. But that didn't matter. I wasn't going to stop. Not for Lena, not for Maya, and not for myself. We were going to take control. We were going to fight back, and we were going to win. I made a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best shot we had. And tonight, we would take the first step. We would stop running. We would face the enemy, and we would take back what was ours. I could feel the tension in the air as I paced back and forth in the small room. The plan was set. Tonight, we were going to confront the enemy head-on. I had no idea what to expect, but I couldn't afford to let fear take over. For weeks, we had been living in hiding, waiting for the right moment, but that moment had arrived. Dmitri and his people were closing in, and we could no longer afford to wait. If we were going to survive this, we needed to act now. I glanced over at Lena and Maya, sitting quietly in the corner. Lena had been more reserved lately, a far cry from the strong, determined woman I had come to rely on. She was still holding on to hope, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Maya, on the other hand, still believed everything would turn out okay. She hadn't fully grasped the danger we were in, and I wasn't sure how much I could shield her from that reality. But that was why we were doing this. I had promised to give her the future she deserved, and I wasn't about to break that promise. We're almost ready, I said, turning to Lena. Everything is in place. It's time to take action. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. I know, she said, her voice steady but tinged with worry. But I still don't know what to expect. We've been running for so long, and now we're about to face them head-on. What if it doesn't work? What if they're too powerful? I could hear the fear in her voice, the uncertainty that had been creeping in. But I knew she was still fighting for Maya, still fighting for the dream she had built with me. I've got a plan, I said, trying to reassure her. We're not going in blindly. We're not just taking a shot in the dark. We have the upper hand now. We've been building up to this, and we're not going to let them control us anymore. Lena looked at me for a moment, then nodded. Okay, she said quietly. I trust you. I just want Maya to be safe. I want her to have the future we talked about, the one we've dreamed of. I walked over to her, putting a hand on her shoulder. We're going to make it happen, I said, my voice firm. I promise. No matter what happens tonight, we're going to make it. Through this. I turned to Maya, who was sitting on the floor with her drawing, still lost in her world of innocence and hope. She looked up when she saw me, and I could see the question in her eyes. Is everything okay? She asked, her voice soft. Yes, I said, kneeling down beside her. Everything's going to be fine. We're just getting ready to go to a new place. A better place, where we'll be safe. Maya smiled, her eyes full of trust, and I knew I would do anything to keep that smile on her face. Will there be a swing? She asked, her voice full of hope. I smiled back at her, my heart aching. Yes, there will be a swing. And a big yard, and a house with lots of room for you to run around. It's everything you've dreamed of. She beamed at me, And for a moment, I allowed myself to believe that everything would work out. But the reality of the situation hit me hard. We had no guarantees. Dmitri and his associates weren't going to just roll over. They had power, they had resources, and they were willing to do whatever it took to maintain control. But that didn't matter. Not anymore. We weren't just running anymore. We were fighting back. We were going to take back our lives. I stood up and walked to the door, ready to put the plan into action. The time for hesitation was over. Let's go, I said, my voice steady. Tonight, we take back control. As we drove to the location we had set up, my heart pounded in my chest. We had gathered everything we needed. Information, people who were on our side, and the resolve to face whatever came next. The streets were quiet, eerily so, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. We were about to make our move, and everything depended on it. I glanced over at Lena, who was sitting in the passenger seat, her eyes fixed ahead. She didn't say anything, but I could see the same determination in her eyes. We were in this together, and we were going to make it out of this together. When we arrived at the location, I instructed Lena and Maya to stay inside the car while I went in to check the area. I couldn't take any chances. I needed to make sure everything was clear before we made our next move. As I walked through the quiet building, my senses were on high alert. Every sound seemed amplified. Every movement felt like it could be the beginning of something dangerous. But there was no turning back now. I made my way to the meeting point, where the group I had arranged was waiting. They were the people I trusted, former allies, people who had seen the worst of what this city could offer and still had the courage to stand up for what was right. They knew what was at stake. We're in position, one of them said, his voice low but confident. We'll be ready when you give the word. I nodded, my heart still racing. The final confrontation was imminent, and I could feel the tension in the air. Everything we had done, everything we had worked for, led to this moment. Wait for my signal, I said. Once we move, there's no turning back. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was it. The fight for our future, for the lives Lena and Maya deserved, was about to begin. And I wasn't going to back down. I was ready. We were ready. I could feel the tension thick in the air as I moved through the darkened building, every step echoing in the quiet space. My heart was racing, but I couldn't afford to show fear, not now. Tonight was the culmination of everything we had been working toward, the turning point that would determine whether we made it out of this mess or if everything we had fought for would come crashing down around us. I had promised Lena and Maya we would be safe, and that promise was now on the line. I checked my phone one more time, scanning for any updates. The team was in position, ready to make their move. I felt a rush of adrenaline as the countdown in my head began. There was no turning back. I had already warned them about what might come, and now I had to lead them through the next phase. The confrontation with Dmitri and his network was imminent, and we were prepared to confront them head-on. I'd spent too many days planning, too many hours building trust, and now the time had come to take action. I walked up to the entrance of the secured room where the meeting was set to take place. My allies were already positioned, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the signal. They had been briefed and knew their roles. Each of them had their own reasons for being there, but now we all had one common goal, to ensure that Lena and Maya could live their lives free from fear. I took a deep breath, my hand resting on the door handle. I glanced back at the corner where I had left Lena and Maya. Lena had been on edge, but she trusted me. I knew that. She didn't want to see her daughter dragged further into this world of danger and deceit. Maya, in her innocence, still believed that the house with the swing and the dog would one day be theirs. She hadn't fully understood the gravity of what was happening, but I promised myself that no matter the cost, I would protect her from this. No child should have to live in fear. The door creaked as I opened it, and the dim light of the room revealed the figures gathered inside. Dmitri was there, just as I had expected. His smug smile met my eyes as he leaned casually against a desk, his presence radiating confidence. He wasn't expecting this. He hadn't anticipated that we would take the fight to him. His smug expression faltered just slightly, but it was enough to show me that he wasn't as in control as he liked to believe. "You've made a mistake coming here," Dmitri said coolly, his voice cutting through the stillness. "You're not ready for what's coming next. You can't stop it." I stepped forward, my voice unwavering. "I'm not here to stop anything, Dmitri. I'm here to end it." I could feel the tension rise, but I wasn't going to let him rattle me. This was the moment I had been waiting for. You've been pulling strings behind the scenes for far too long, I continued. It's time for the truth to come out. It's time for you to face the consequences. Dimitri's smile faded completely, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You have no idea who you're dealing with, he spat. This is bigger than you. This is bigger than anything you can comprehend. I shook my head. I don't need to comprehend it all, Dimitri. I just need to make sure it ends. You've hurt too many people, and it's over now. The room grew quiet, the only sound the distant hum of the building's machinery. I could feel my pulse quicken as I took another step forward. I had no illusions about what this might cost, but I wasn't backing down. I couldn't. You really think you can just walk away from this? Dimitri said, his voice dripping with venom. You're just one person. You don't have the power to take me down. You're wrong, I said. I may be just one person, but I'm not alone. And I'm not afraid to fight for what's right. As I spoke, I could feel the weight of the words settle into the room, into the hearts of everyone watching. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the people who had been hurt by his actions, the people whose lives had been torn apart by his greed and manipulation. And it was about Lena and Maya, the two people who had trusted me enough to believe that a better future was possible. The door behind Dimitri opened slowly, and I turned to see my team step into the room. They were ready. They were prepared. And together, we were going to make sure that Dimitri and everyone involved in his web of lies would never hurt anyone again. You've lost, I said, my voice calm but final. This ends tonight. Dimitri's eyes darkened with rage, but I saw something else there too, a flicker of fear. He had underestimated us, and now he realized that his empire was crumbling. He took a step back, his eyes darting around the room as he tried to figure out his next move. But it was too late. We had him cornered, and there was no way out. You think this is over? He growled, his voice low with malice. You're wrong. There's always more. There's always someone else pulling the strings. Not anymore, I said firmly. This ends tonight, Dimitri. No more lies. No more games. The room was silent for a long moment, the weight of what we had done settling in. I looked over at Lena and Maya, who were waiting in the next room. They were safe. We had done it. We had taken back control of our lives. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, we had won. Dimitri's world had crumbled, and with it, the fear and control he had used to manipulate us. It was over. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the freedom that came with knowing we were in control of our own future. I stood in the quiet aftermath, the weight of everything that had happened finally beginning to settle. Dimitri and his people were no longer a threat. The web of manipulation, control, and fear that had ensnared us for so long had been broken. I had kept my promise. Lena and Maya were safe. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to breathe a little easier. But there was still so much to process. The fight wasn't just about defeating Dimitri. It was about rebuilding, about offering Lena and Maya the future they had dreamed of. It was about healing, both for them and for myself. I had never expected this journey to take me where it did. I had come into their lives with the intention of helping, of protecting them. But somewhere along the way, I had found something I didn't even know I was looking for. A purpose, a family, a chance to make a real difference. I walked into the small living room where Lena and Maya were sitting. They were waiting for me, their eyes full of curiosity and, now, quiet hope. Maya was sitting on the couch, drawing again, but this time the picture she was working on was different. There was no house, no tree, no swing. Instead, it was a picture of her and Lena standing together, holding hands. And I, standing beside them, with my arm around both of them. It was a simple picture, but it spoke volumes. It spoke of the life we were beginning to build together, a life where we didn't have to look over our shoulders anymore, where the future wasn't a constant battle for survival. It was a picture of peace. I sat down beside her, looking at the drawing. You're really good at this, Maya, I said, my voice soft with emotion. It's beautiful. Maya looked up at me and smiled, her eyes lighting up. It's us, she said simply. This is how we're going to be. Lena joined us on the couch, sitting close to Maya. She looked at the picture for a moment, and then turned her gaze to me. You've done more than I ever imagined, she said, her voice full of gratitude and quiet awe. I don't know how to thank you for everything. For keeping your promise, for fighting for us. I shook my head. You don't need to thank me, Lena. You and Maya are my family now. And I would do it all again, 1,000 times over, to make sure you're safe. The room was quiet for a moment, filled only with the soft hum of the outside world. It was a peaceful silence, the kind you only get when the storm has passed, when the danger has passed. I could feel the weight lifting, piece by piece. I knew there were still challenges ahead. There would always be remnants of the past to deal with. But now we were in control. Now we had the power to rebuild. So what's next? Lena asked, her voice hopeful. What do we do now? I looked at both of them, the two people who had become my reason for everything. We start fresh, I said, my voice firm. We build the life we've always wanted. We don't let the past define us. We create our future. Maya looked at me, a bright smile spreading across her face. I like that, she said. A future with no more bad guys. I chuckled softly, the sound almost foreign to me after everything that had happened. Exactly, I said. A future with no more bad guys. The days that followed were a blur of small victories, of moments of peace that felt like they had been a lifetime in the making. Lena found a new job, one where she felt valued and appreciated. Maya settled into a new school, where she began to thrive, her bright spirit shining through. And me? I was just grateful to be a part of it. To see them smiling, to see the weight of fear lift from their shoulders, was all I needed. It was enough. We were rebuilding, together. The scars of the past were still there, but they didn't define us. They were reminders of the strength we had found, of the courage we had shown when everything seemed hopeless. We had fought for a better future, and we had won. And now, we were going to live it. As I sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset with Lena and Maya, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The past was behind us, and the future was wide open. We had made it through the storm, and now we were free. Free to live, free to love, and free to dream. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that we could have everything we had ever wanted. Together.